By 1992, the RPG genre had pretty much hit its stride in Japan. The Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games reached a mass audience that loved the fantasy-oriented atmosphere, dramatic stories, and strategic combat both series offered. This dynamic caused a small developer called Asmik to try their own hand at the genre in 1992, when the Super Famicom was exactly 2 years old. Teaming up with publisher Enix, they created Paladins Quest, which aspired to be bold and do many things differently to set it apart from other RPGs. In Japan, it was known as Lennus, Kodai Kikai no Kyoku, or Memories of an Ancient Machine. The game's story centers upon Chesney, a 13-year-old boy studying at the magic school on the planet of Lennus. One day, his buddies persuade him to climb the nearby tower on the eastern edge of campus. With a friend named Duke, he eventually reaches the top, where he places his hand into an odd, hand-shaped device. This unfortunate decision activates an ancient machine called Dahlgren that unleashes a wave of destruction. When he wakes up, Chesney realizes the magic school was completely destroyed in the process, and soon learns that he's the only one that can put a stop to the ancient machine he empowered unknowingly. I have to say that when I first played through this, I immediately thought of how thematically similar this was to Secret of Mana's intro. What with the whole innocent dare causing the release of a sealed evil upon the world bit. Throughout nearly the entire game, you control Chesney and Midia, an aspiring female spiritualist. In addition to these two, many other characters join your party, and you can even hire special mercenary characters in pubs throughout the world. There's over 12 characters in all, but you are limited to having 4 characters in your party at one time, and you can only equip the 2 main characters with items found throughout the game. The first thing, and I mean the absolute first thing you'll notice when playing this game, is that the developers were going for a completely different aesthetic. The colors are bright and cartoony, and really stick out if you compare them to the darker or more serious RPGs from this time. Also, the buildings look like, well, something from a carnival or an alien universe of some kind. It's so incredibly different from anything else on the SNES that it almost appears as if this title was on another system or something. In one word, it's just weird, but I do find the people that really like Paladins Quest, and there are some that do, always point to this facet to justify their opinion. Combat is the part of the game that will probably be most familiar to fans. It's a turn-based affair with a first-person view like many other games, but the interface is, bulky and awkward. I really don't like how the menu text obscures everything behind it, and I think the game could have really benefited by limiting the menu to a certain portion of the screen rather than using the entirety of it. Each round, your characters can choose to attack an enemy, cast a spell, use an item, defend, or run. Probably the most unusual aspect of Paladins Quest is that spells, rather than consuming magic like most RPGs, actually expend hit points instead. This means that healing can only be accomplished through items, which does annoy me a bit. Spells also increase in power the more they're used though, so at least the system was innovative to a certain degree. The spell effects are definitely a little corny, and not well animated at all. Just take a look at this fire spell. It's pretty rough even for this time. I would never claim that spell effects are ever the most important aspect of any game like this, but it does show a lack of attention. As a game typical of its era, there are a lot of random encounters, and some of the dungeons are pretty long and grueling. The odd structures in the game also make it difficult to determine where you're supposed to go at times. Like the Breath of Fire games, this one also suffers from having to use so many abbreviated names for weapons, spells, and armor because of character limitations. It's totally frustrating. North American gamers may be surprised to find out that Paladins Quest has a sequel, Lennus 2 Fuin no Shito, or The Apostles of the Seals. That game has a similar visual and thematic style, but is much better tuned, has a far superior battle interface, and much better graphics. It came out in the summer of 1996 in Japan, long after the prime of the SNES. There is a translation patch available for it, and if you like Paladins Quest, I think you're guaranteed to like that one even better. Overall, I just can't recommend Paladins Quest in the same way I would recommend many other RPGs from the period. It's filled with quirks, oddities, and irritations that will turn some players away, even those that are retro RPG fans. The music and story are the title's saving graces, but the individual characters aren't that lovable, and its odd visual style and combat menu interface will turn other fans off. And, as far as I can tell, the game, despite its title, has nothing to do with Paladins at all, and Chesney and Midia certainly aren't. As to how the name was decided upon, I have no clue, but it may just have been some kind of marketing tactic. Notwithstanding some of its issues, Paladin's Quest still has some appeal to RPG fanatics that never got a chance to try it. If you still want to give it a go, keep this one in a lower tier of your RPGs to play. In the early days of the SNES, RPG fans were treated to Paladin's Quest, a very unique looking, zany, original RPG that, didn't have anything to do with Paladins. The game was fairly polarizing, but it did gain appreciation in some circles. Still, many of the fans that did enjoy it would probably be surprised to know that it actually had a sequel. Lennus 2 Fui no Shito, or Apostles of the Seals, was released in Japan only in 1996. Amazingly, the game's development spanned 4 years, an unprecedented period for a Super Famicom title. It featured the same creative team, developer, and publisher, but it wasn't released until well beyond the glory days of the system. This was pretty unfortunate too, because the game incorporated some interesting improvements over the original, while still maintaining its trademark quirks. Thankfully, a fully functional English patch was released by a translation team called Magic Destiny, which gives us all the chance to play it now. I'll include a link to the patch in the description as always. As far as the story goes, you play as Faris, a godlike being called a Rygon that was freed from a crystal after thousands of years of slumber. He awakens in the underworld of Andel, where he is viewed as a messiah figure because his arrival was foretold by ancient prophecies. According to the legend, his destiny is to fulfill the Great Union, an event that brings together several small islands after years drifting apart, and to restore the land to its former prosperity. To do this, he must retrieve artifacts from each of Andel's islands, accompanied by various companions. At the beginning of the game, you are actually given the choice of which ones you want to bring along with you. My personal favorite, of course, is Jode, otherwise known as Jode the Chode. Unfortunately, most of these characters have virtually no storyline to speak of, and combined with the fact that Faris is a silent protagonist, the character development is really lacking. In fact, it's almost non-existent. However, Lennus 2 does offer a silver lining of sorts. Those that played Paladin's Quest may be pleased to hear that there are more mercenaries than ever, and finding the most powerful ones can add some fun to stale character arcs. Combat in Lennus 2 definitely has a distinct look. It's similar to the style of the first game, in a unique first-person view where your characters and their respective hit points are pushed up and brought toward the center of the screen. It's still a turn-based affair, but in between turns you select from menu commands that appear in the direct center of the screen, directly on top of the enemies you are fighting. You can choose from spell, item, defend, or run. Like in Paladin's Quest, there aren't any magic points like in other RPGs, so spells consume hit points instead. This still provides a drawback for casting spells, it's just done in a different way. Unlike Paladin's Quest though, you don't need to power up your spells through frequent casting. They are upgraded through special items dropped by enemies. Attacks are done by selecting actual weapons rather than by using an attack command, so you can accumulate large numbers of weapons and use them individually in combat. Some weapons have impressive characteristics too, like the ability to strike multiple times or cast spells, which makes item experimentation very fun. You can't really trust the auto-equip functionality, you just have to try many and find the most powerful. The enemy attack animations are a bit cheesy, but still pretty cool. Some of them are simple, but others are more complex and creative, especially those of the bosses. The closest game I can compare this to is what you'll find from enemy attack animations in Dragon Quest VI. Each spell also has a graphical effect, and these are a little more lackluster. It's a good way to add some substance to the battles, but they won't blow you away or anything like that. I personally don't like the menu display, in fact I really don't like it. Having the between round commands exist as boxes in the middle of the screen is completely awkward. I personally hate this part of the gameplay and wish it would have been redesigned. It's super clunky and out of place, and definitely my biggest grievance with the game. The wacky visual style that stood out in Paladin's Quest is definitely back here. The bright colors, landscapes that look like they're from an alien world, and uniquely tinted color palettes can all be seen here as well. The graphical quality itself is a big leap beyond what we saw in Paladin's Quest, though it doesn't exactly match the excellence of some other stuff that came out around the same time, like Super Mario RPG or Treasure Hunter G. If nothing else, Lennus 2 and Paladin's Quest stand out graphically compared to their SNES RPG counterparts. Also, there are a lot of moments that link the storyline from Paladin's Quest into this one, so those that enjoy that sort of thing will definitely get a kick out of the game's final chapters. Lennus 2's soundtrack was created by veteran composer Kohei Tanaka, who primarily produced music for anime like Dragon Ball and Tenchi Muyo. Tanaka also created the score for Paladin's Quest, or Lennus as it was known in Japan. Lennus 2's soundtrack is a pretty sizable array of 55 total songs, and features a combination of melodic and atmospheric pieces. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but I wouldn't say it blew me away. Lennus 2 is also a very long game, and will give you more than 40 hours of gameplay your first time through. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty good experience though. The lack of character development, horrible menu interface, and frustrating dungeons do take it down a few notches, but the main story is better than the original. The spell upgrade system is superior, and item experimentation was really fun. It's certainly among the most overlooked RPGs on the system, and if you're a fan of the genre that hasn't played this one yet, it's still well worth it. If there's nothing else to be said about them, the two Lennus games dared to innovate with their own trademark style that set the series apart from Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and other RPG franchises. In my mind, they did this in 3 ways. First, what other series looked this zany with such over-the-top graphical environments and pastel colors? For better or worse, they stand out visually. Second, having no magic system at all and using hit points to cast spells instead made the Lennus games unique as well. Third, selecting items for attacks rather than a general command opened up a whole new world of possibilities, and allowed weapons to retain usefulness throughout the entire adventure. Of all the merits of the series, this one is probably the most compelling to me. For a time, it looked as if there would be a third entry in the series, as Lennus 3 was at one point planned for development. According to series creator and director Hidenori Shibao, its setting would have been the planet of Raiga. As he said in an interview, the game would have explained why people there built the 2 satellites, Lennus and Eltz, which were the settings for the first 2 games. Ultimately though, plans for Lennus 3 were shelved for one major reason. Lennus 2 was a flop and sold way below expectations. The game's release date and long delayed development seemed to doom the project, and it was only released after millions of fans had already moved on to the PlayStation and Saturn. As Shibao put it, the game was a huge bomb, and the last thing anyone wanted to hear were the words Lennus 3. As a result, the title's vision only ever existed in its creator's head. A true shame to those that love the series, but also a cold hard reminder that the video game industry is a business and meeting sales figures is never guaranteed. Shibao did go on to serve as the chief writer of Legend of Legaia, which Sony published for the PlayStation in 1999. However, Lennus mostly went forgotten and was overshadowed by other longer-lasting RPG franchises. Even still, its place in the annals of retro gaming isn't forgotten here, and both games, though not perfect, still have many redeeming qualities and are perfectly playable today. If you're watching this as a fan of the Lennus series, what do you think the best part of these games was? Leave me a comment below, and let me know if you have any special stories or nostalgia from them. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell for more retro video game content, and please join my Discord community linked in the description. Also, please consider supporting my channel via YouTube's Join feature to receive member bonuses such as advanced videos and complete video transcripts.